The wind howled a lonely tune across the snow-dusted peaks of the Chugach Mountains, a constant biting presence in the small, bustling camp of Gold Creek. This was a place carved out of a wilderness that gave nothing freely, a chaotic and vibrant frontier of hope and desperation. It was 1897, and the gold rush was a fever that had drawn men from every corner of the world, including Mikhail Petrov, a stoic, weary-eyed Russian immigrant. His daughter, Anya, stood by the entrance of their canvas tent, her breath a small cloud in the frigid air as she watched the men pass by, their faces etched with a mix of grim determination and fleeting joy. Anya was different from the other children in the camp. At 18, she had the quiet strength of the mountains themselves and the keen intellect of a person who had learned early to observe and listen. Her fluency in Russian, a legacy from her father, was an unusual skill in this corner of the world. Her father, a proud but reserved man, had taught her everything he knew about mining, from the feel of a pan sifting river silt to the deep, resonant ring of a pickaxe striking solid rock. Gold Creek was their new home, and for a few months it had offered them a fragile hope. The man who had shattered that hope was a Baron Anatoly Volkov. He was not a miner, but an investor, a man whose polished boots never touched the mud and whose hands were as soft as a nobleman's. He had arrived with promises of modern machinery and fair shares for all. He had bought out claims, including the one next to Mikhail's, promising to pay them based on the weight of the gold they extracted, which he would then transport and sell in town. His influence was immense, his power seemingly absolute. Mikhail had always been suspicious. He had been a miner too long to trust a man who spoke so smoothly and dressed so impeccably. A week ago, Volkov had presented him with a meager share for a month's work, a pittance that didn't align with the heavy bags of ore they had been pulling from the ground. Mikhail had confronted him, his voice low and dangerous, but Volkov, surrounded by his armed guards, had simply laughed. "Your gold is not what you think it is, old man," he'd sneered in flawless Russian. "You may have the ore, but I have the buyers, and I say your share is this." That night, Mikhail had fallen ill. A sudden, debilitating cough had gripped him, followed by a persistent fever that left him weak and disoriented. The camp doctor, a gruff but kind man named Dr. Thompson, couldn't find a cause, but Anya knew it was the weight of despair that was slowly consuming her father. He had invested everything in this claim, and Volkov had stolen their future. One afternoon, Anya was delivering a pot of her father's stew to a neighboring tent. She overheard a conversation between Volkov and one of his men. The man was complaining about the heavy crates they were loading onto a wagon. "It's not all ore, Baron. The weight feels wrong, too much stone, not enough of the heavy stuff," the man said, his voice a low grumble. Volkov laughed, a cold, dry sound. "That's the point, isn't it? The ore is light, the stones are heavy. We fill the crates with what we can find, and the miners get their due in fool's gold. No one can prove a thing, not out here. It's a perfect scam, Vasya. 40 million, just waiting for me in San Francisco." He then switched to English, his voice a mocking imitation of a miner's cheer. "I tell them what they want to hear, and they give me what I want. Simple, isn't it?" Anya froze, her heart thudding against her ribs. The men's Russian was so fluid, so quick, she almost didn't catch the nuance. Her mind raced, putting the pieces together. The light ore, the heavy stones, the pittance her father had received. Volkov wasn't buying the gold. He was just pretending to. He was stealing their hard work and replacing the gold with worthless rocks. Her father's suspicion wasn't paranoia. It was the truth. Tears welled in her eyes, not of sadness, but of hot, fierce rage. She couldn't let him get away with it. Her father's illness, the suffering of all the other miners, it was all because of this man. But how could she prove it? Volkov was powerful, and no one would believe a young girl over a wealthy baron with armed guards. She turned back to her tent, the pot of stew forgotten in her hands. The wind whipped around her, a cold reminder of the unforgiving landscape. But inside, a fire of determination had just been lit. She had to expose him, not just for her father, but for everyone. The journey would be dangerous and lonely, but she was her father's daughter, and she was not afraid. Thank you for watching the first part of this story. If you're enjoying it, please consider subscribing to our channel and hitting the notification bell so you don't miss the next chapters. The next day, Anya started her mission. She knew she couldn't rely on brute force. She had to be smart. She remembered her father's lessons, not just about mining, but about people. He'd always told her to watch, to listen, and to find the truth hidden in plain sight. Her first step was to find an ally, someone who was also a victim of Volkov's scam, but had the courage to fight back. She thought of Liam O'Connell, a young Irish miner who worked the claim adjacent to theirs. Liam was a man of action, his face smudged with dirt and his hands calloused from hard work. He was known for his quick temper, but also for his deep sense of justice. He was a man who believed in a fair fight. Anya approached his tent, her heart pounding. "Liam," she began, her voice steady despite her nerves, "I need to talk to you about Baron Volkov." Liam, who was mending a tear in his pants, looked up, his expression guarded. "That man's nothing but trouble, Anya. Best to stay clear." "He's not just trouble, Liam. He's a thief," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "He's not taking our gold. He's swapping it with worthless rocks. My father is sick with worry because of him. I heard him talking in Russian yesterday. He's running a massive scam." Liam's eyes narrowed. "In Russian? Why would he speak in Russian? He's a rich fella from New York, isn't he?" "No," Anya said, a little more confidently now. "He's a Russian nobleman. I heard him. He's taking the gold and replacing it with heavy stones. He's talking about a $40 million fortune in San Francisco. My father always said the gold he got wasn't right. It was too light. The bags Volkov took were too heavy. It all makes sense." Liam stared at her, his expression slowly shifting from suspicion to a grim realization. He recalled the meager payment he'd received, a mere fraction of what his claim should have produced. His own father, back in Ireland, was waiting for the money that would pay off their farm's debts. This man had not only stolen his livelihood, he had stolen his family's future. "What can we do?" Liam asked, his voice low and dangerous. "We need proof," Anya replied. "We need to get into his storage tent and weigh the crates. We need to find the real gold and the stones, and we need to tell everyone." That night, under the cold glow of a half-moon, Anya and Liam made their move. The camp was quiet, most of the miners asleep in their tents, exhausted from the day's labor. Volkov's guards patrolled the perimeter, but their movements were predictable. Anya, small and quick, was able to slip between the shadows and a gap in the fence, her knowledge of the camp's nooks and crannies paying off. Liam, strong and agile, followed close behind. Inside the large canvas tent, they found a small, portable scale and dozens of large wooden crates. Each one was labeled with a different miner's name, including Mikhail's. Anya worked quickly, her heart pounding in her ears. She opened a crate, and a dull glint of gold caught the lamplight. She then checked a neighboring crate. It was filled with heavy river stones, just as she had suspected. She had to verify the weight difference. "Liam, help me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. They carefully placed a crate of what they knew was gold on the scale. They noted the weight. Then they weighed a crate filled with stones. The difference was stark. The gold-filled crates were significantly lighter than the stone-filled ones. The numbers didn't lie. As they were working, a noise from outside made them freeze. The sound of footsteps. A guard was approaching. Liam instinctively reached for a heavy pan to defend themselves, but Anya shook her head. They couldn't fight. They had to be silent. They hid behind a stack of empty crates, holding their breath as the guard walked past, his lantern casting long, dancing shadows. Once the coast was clear, they continued, their movements more hurried now. They found Volkov's personal ledger tucked away in a small satchel. Anya, with her knowledge of both English and Russian, could read the entries. It was a detailed record of the scam, with names of miners and their payments, far less than what they were owed. It was the final piece of the puzzle, a smoking gun. They gathered the evidence: a small bag of the gold from one crate, a stone from another, and the ledger. They slipped out of the tent, their hearts full of a terrifying triumph. They had the proof, but now came the hardest part: convincing a camp full of men who had put their trust in a man who seemed untouchable. The dawn was just beginning to paint the sky a soft, gentle pink, but for Anya and Liam, the real battle was about to begin. The news spread like wildfire through the camp. Liam and Anya had spent the early morning hours going from tent to tent, showing the proof they had gathered. At first, there was disbelief, followed by a quiet, simmering rage. By sunrise, a crowd of 100 miners had gathered in the camp's central clearing, their faces grim and their tools held like weapons. Baron Volkov, stepping out of his lavish tent, was met with a wall of silent, angry men. His smug expression faltered for a moment, replaced by a flicker of irritation. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, his voice ringing with false authority. Anya stepped forward, a small, defiant figure against the backdrop of the towering mountains. She held the ledger in one hand and a small, heavy bag of gold in the other. "It means," she said, her voice clear and strong, and to everyone's surprise, she switched to flawless, elegant Russian, a language that stood out starkly in the rough-and-tumble camp, "that you are a thief, Baron Anatoly Volkov." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Volkov's eyes widened in shock. The air grew thick with tension. He had always presented himself as a sophisticated American investor, and now his true identity was revealed. He instinctively began to respond in Russian, his face pale with fury. "You have no right to—" "That's not true," Anya said, cutting him off, still in perfect Russian. "Your ledger says otherwise. It says you're taking our gold, swapping it with stones and hoarding the profits. $40 million, you said. Well, we want our share." Volkov's guards moved to surround him, their hands on their guns, but the crowd of miners was too large, too united in their anger. Dr. Thompson stepped forward, his eyes fixed on Volkov. "Your medicine for Mikhail. I believe it was a ruse, wasn't it, to keep him quiet?" The sheer weight of the crowd's silent accusation was a force Volkov couldn't fight. He looked at Anya, her eyes burning with a righteous fire, and he knew he had been beaten. His carefully constructed lie, built on the trust of desperate men, had been dismantled by a miner's daughter and her unlikely ally. The miners took back their gold. The camp authorities, once swayed by Volkov's wealth, saw the undeniable evidence and arrested him and his men. The news of the Gold Creek scam spread far and wide, a cautionary tale of greed and a testament to the power of a united community. As for Anya, her father recovered. The weight of the injustice lifted from his shoulders. He looked at his daughter with an immense silent pride. She had not only saved their family, she had saved an entire community. The camp was no longer a place of quiet desperation, but of renewed hope. Anya realized then that her strength wasn't just in her knowledge of mining or her fluency in Russian. It was in her courage to stand up for what was right, to face a powerful man and expose his lies. Her personal growth, much like the gold they had uncovered, had been hidden, waiting for a moment to be brought to light. The story of the miner's daughter who spoke in perfect Russian and exposed the Baron's scam became a legend in the camps, a symbol of justice and the resilience of the human spirit. And as the sun set over the Alaskan peaks, casting long, peaceful shadows over the camp, Anya looked out at the horizon, not with the weary eyes of a miner's daughter, but with the clear, bright gaze of a young woman who had found her own kind of gold, a truth more precious than any mineral.